Hello, and welcome to the Highlight Corporation New Hire.
Entanglement is a first-person physics-based puzzle platformer where you play as a new hire in training at the Halite Corporation. Players will be challenged to master 3 mind-bending abilities to solve increasingly difficult and treacherous training modules. Entangle objects together, then scale, mirror, and split those objects in order to make your way through the puzzles. Let's hear from the developer of Entanglement about what we can expect from this amazing puzzle platformer.
Let's get started. First one should be pretty easy.
I guess a little bit just about me real quick is around 7 months ago, I quit my engineering job to kind of pursue this game Entanglement. And it all started with the idea of sort of thematically quantum entanglement. And what that meant to me was like pairing objects together. And I was thinking to myself, like, has there ever been a game where you pair objects and the properties of one are dependent on the other? And so the first mechanic that was born out of that idea was the movement mechanic. So there are 3 main mechanics that you use in the game, and the movement one is really simple. It's once you pair 2 objects together, when you move one in one direction, the other one will move in an equal amount in the opposite direction. And so that was the first one I conceived, and I thought it was really cool, and I kind of kept running with that idea. And I wanted, sort of in entertainment in general, 3 is sort of like a nice round number. So I challenged myself to think of 2 more, again, using that sort of pairing concept. And that's when I came up with the second one, which was probably the second most obvious, which is scaling or size. So as one shrinks, the other one grows and vice versa. And, that one's sort of immediately understandable. And then the last one is, I call it the split mechanic right now. And it's actually used in 2 separate ways. So if you pair 2 objects together, you can join them at their average position, and so you can kind of like warp an object into a room, and I thought that was really cool. Or alternatively, you can take one object and split it into 2, and then when you rejoin it, the same thing happens. They join at their average position. And so yeah, that's sort of the game in a nutshell from like a mechanics standpoint. So at present, the way the game works is you are like a new hire at this company, and it's sort of like an Amazon-like company. And so the idea is like you're working at sort of a packaging warehouse, but it's in a somewhat futuristic setting. Anyways, you're given this tool, and it allows you to leverage all these different powers, and it's all in the name of like helping you move these packages around. But as part of your training, you're like tasked with mastering this device. And so right now, all the puzzles are comprised of you having to place these different packages on. They're called analysis pads, and they kind of just work like buttons. And so if you place a box on a button, the button will change color and it will open a door. And so doors can either take 1 button, 2 buttons, all the way up to like 5 different triggers to open. And so it could be a combination of just your normal button, or there's another one called a weigh station. And so that's just once you place a box on it, the box will have to be a certain weight to weigh it down the requisite amount, and if that's triggered, then the door will open. And so the way the 3 different mechanics play into it is that these buttons are going to be in various locations, and in the first level, for example, you actually don't use any powers, and so it's as simple as just placing the boxes on the various analysis pads, and even without the powers, you can kind of come up with some pretty interesting puzzles. But all subsequent levels involve these entanglement powers. And so to use the like movement mechanic, for example, there could be like a button on the ceiling, and you have to figure out, well, how not only do I get a box to hit that button that's on the ceiling, but remain there so I myself, the player, can walk through the door. And it's kind of fun when the player realizes that they can link a smaller box to like a fatter or heavier box and drop the heavier box off a ledge. And when that happens, the smaller box will like rise to the ceiling and stay there. And once it hits the button, the one that's falling actually ceases to move as well. And so I kind of like I really like that moment in the game where the player realizes this for the first time. Not only are they moving in like opposite directions, but the obstacles that one object encounters, you feel those effects on the other object as well. So there are actually two that come to mind, and so I'll start with like the slightly simpler one, which is in the case of the scaling one. So the power where you can transfer size between boxes. You can run into this scenario from like a programming perspective where an object can get too big and then break through the room. And so I had to kind of come up with this system where there's all these sort of hidden colliders on an object. And not only that, the colliders are strategically placed on a given object, in this case, like a box. And so they'll be on either side of them. And you have to keep track if both are being triggered simultaneously, because that'll represent a scenario in which like the box is being compressed from both sides. But what makes the problem maybe a little more interesting and difficult to solve is like, okay, well, I can tell if a box is being compressed from both sides, but what if one of the sides is an object that's movable, right? So it's not truly, in reality, it wouldn't truly be being prevented from growing anymore. And so I had to, again, come up with another solution where you check to see if the object that it's hitting on both sides is one that's static or not static. And if you're encountering two static objects, you know that you're being compressed. And if you're encountering one static object and one that's not static, you can grow until that non-static object becomes static. And so it's a fairly like complicated, I think, fairly complicated solution to what seemed like a simple problem. But there was no like fail safes baked into Unity, let's say, for for preventing an object from getting too big. So that was really fun. That maybe took like a day or two to solve, and so that was like a really like fun problem to dig your teeth into, and the payoff for that wasn't that long. But the really difficult problem, and the one that like my whole sort of involvement in game development hinged on, was the movement mechanic. And so this was a problem that until I solved it, I decided I wasn't going to quit my day job until I solved it. And so once I finally did, I was ready to move on. So I mentioned earlier, right, like that if a box moves one direction, the other one will move in the opposite direction. But what kind of made it more difficult was the forces on one box are sort of transferred to the other. And so I think like the obvious way to approach it is, you look at the position of both objects every frame, and you figure out, okay, well, how much did they move between frames? And then you apply that movement to the other one. But that doesn't really quite work, because you're asking both objects to like feed their position into the other one. And so I come from like a mechanical engineering background, and I took a few courses in like mechatronics. And so my understanding is that kind of creates this runaway feedback loop, because you feed the results from one into the other, but then those results are essentially fed back into the to the other one, and you just get this loop where they're both informing each other's position. And so back when I was first starting, I had some really, really glitchy behavior where the boxes would be like shaking, and then eventually they would just like disappear, and I was like, what's going on? So anyways, the way I solve this, which I think people might find interesting, is I actually create an inverted version of every level. And so there's this upside down and inside out geometry that's invisible to the player. Like the player will not see this as they solve the levels. But what it does is allow there to be like hard geometry that the boxes in the non-inverted world can actually interact with. So although you don't see it when box number 2 hits a wall, box number 1 will hit that same wall, but it'll just be invisible. And so it actually like really, really smoothed out all of the movement, and was ultimately the way that I was able to solve this really, really difficult problem. And on top of it too, there's all these things you have to kind of figure out when it comes to creating this inverted level. It's like, well, how do you tell the boxes which way to rotate, and what does rotation look like in an inverted sense? And I had to kind of come to grips with like quaternions and different rotation things. And so I actually was fairly proficient at those for some time. And what was really funny is that the ultimate solution didn't involve anything quite as complex, as far as rotationally speaking. And so it's just sort of testament. I don't know if you've ever like heard of, it's sort of like almost Occam's razor, right? It's like the simplest solution is the one you're gonna wind up with. But I kind of knew that would have to be the case for it to be robust. And I think at this junction, it's fairly robust. The movement mechanic and the split mechanic and the size mechanic, they're probably all things I can do to make them an even tighter gameplay experience. But where I am right now is I have this full demo with 5 levels that I think gives like a good idea of what the game overall is like and the vibe I'm going for. And I'm using that to sort of pitch to different companies. But the demo is live for people who are interested in playing. I've really just loved getting feedback from people because I'm pretty sure that when you combine all 3 mechanics, the puzzle, like the possibility for different puzzles is fairly endless. Like the way they stack on each other is pretty cool. So I wouldn't say that I'm currently working on it. However, I want to get started sort of imminently on it, which is with the aesthetic change that I mentioned sort of at the top of this, came a change in the way I was designing levels, which is initially I was using Pro Builder, and you can sort of drag and pull faces, and since the game is largely corridor based and room based, I was just using Pro Builder, and then it was sort of a non-issue to invert all of the geometry to make that inverted level that I was talking about. But with the aesthetic change, I changed it to this like modular block way of creating levels, and now I have like the level auto generate its inverted self at the start of each level. And so my hope is I would love to include some type of level editor for players, because depending on how successful I am getting funding, it would still be neat for this game to persist. And for as much time I've spent with the game and its mechanics, I'm sure there are like millions of possibilities that I haven't even thought of. And what better way to sort of bring those to the fore than putting it in like people's hands and just having them like create levels and just like the absolutely most absurd puzzles. Like I would just love to see that, and somebody maybe who's not as like close to the game and sort of how their imagination works with the 3 mechanics, I think would be really cool.
Be sure to exterminate it immediately.
So this is it from a game perspective. Entanglement's my first game, and I'm super excited to make it. But I guess coming right out of college, I had a job, entry-level mechanical engineering job, and at the time the company wasn't doing well, and so no one was really like checking in on me or doing anything like that. And I would ask for projects and stuff, but they just didn't have it. So I was like, well, I got to do something. Like I'm going nuts over here, and I downloaded Unity, and it was just amazing. Like I think it was probably within the first day, right? You do that like roll a ball tutorial, and I was like, I couldn't believe that I had done that. And I know I was following a tutorial step by step, but I was like, this is amazing. I mean, the tools are such that it's so accessible that, you know, anyone can do it. But I just felt, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I kind of tabled that maybe for like the next 6 years as I, continued as a contract mechanical engineer. And once the idea hit my, once I had that first idea for the movement in the opposite direction, which was about like 2.5 years ago at this point, it was just on my mind ever since. And finally, like re-downloaded Unity, proved myself that I could figure out how to implement that equal and opposite motion, and then quit my job. Mechanical engineering is like a beast, I think, and it was so nice, even just in this context. Like, right now I'm not working for anybody. I'm just trying to get this game off the ground. But what I have found is that the feedback loop when it comes to proving out a concept is so much more instantaneous when it comes to, I guess, software, or in this case, like game development, right? Like I can change a line of code and instantly see if it made the problem better or worse. And that is just not the case with something like mechanical engineering, where you have to design something, then prototype it, build that prototype, test to see if your changes, made sense, or again, made the product better or worse. And the real hard pill to swallow there is like each prototype is, it can be so expensive. And so this workflow is just amazing. And so I've really taken to it, I think. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much better. And my wife at the time, I guess we left in January. So my wife had gotten a job out in the Bay Area. We were both living in Boston, and she, decided to take that job over here. And I was, it's sort of this confluence of all these changes in my life. Just got married, she got a job, we're moving, and I figured it was a really great opportunity to finally do the thing that I wanted to do. And in my head, you see all these people who are successful, and I was just told myself, I was like, there's no real difference between them and me. It's like, you kind of have to take yourself seriously and just be like, if there's nothing like inherently about me that's going to stop me from being successful. It's just like, there's all different elements that play into it, whether it's luck and your connections, and that's where the risk gets involved. But I think, I think people sometimes are maybe, they're kind of deterred from taking this chance because success, it seems like it's like locked behind some wall for like special people. And I'm hoping it's not, I'm kind of hoping that, you can, through, some amount of hard work, you can mitigate, the luck that you need. And so, I'm still in it. I'm about 7 months in, and I would say within the last like month and a half, I have started like pitching to different publishers. And so that seems to be a slower process. But so I'm hoping, I guess, for the best at this point. Hopefully somebody, I probably have like 30 something feelers out there or whatever, and right now I'm just like, I only need one, I think, to maybe help fund this game and bring it into reality. And I guess above all else is, I know, even if, whether it's monetarily or, it's sometimes you have to, I mean, it'd be amazing, right? If my game was just like reached a bunch of people, right? That would just be so cool and rewarding for me. But regardless, having taken the plunge and deciding to pursue my passion, and even if this particular one doesn't work out, I'm hoping I can find a spot, in game development, as opposed to returning to mechanical engineering, right? And I think all those things will be worth it in the end because I've learned so much, and that's another great part of about all of this is like just a sheer amount you can learn on your own, and it's fun, and if it's something you're passionate about, it's just amazing. And so I don't think even if it fails, I don't think I'll have any regrets. Yeah, so I decided to, I think, take a different approach than a lot of what I've been seeing, say on like Reddit or even I don't know. I follow like people like Thomas Brush and stuff like that. So maybe it's like a hybrid approach, but so I see a lot of people like doing the straight up marketing, and
Now, this next one.
I guess I went, I was like, okay, I want to kind of reach out to publishers. I actually initially started out reaching out to VCs, and that was even less successful than the publisher route. And so I just started reaching out to publishers, and you can do all these cross-referencing and be like, okay, this publisher has published a game that's similar to my game. Maybe I have increased odds with them, and so you kind of play it that way. But as far as the marketing side, I have my little YouTube channel with my walkthroughs and let's see, and then I finally got a Reddit for the first time in life, and those don't, the Reddit, I think I haven't seen any real traction on, and YouTube, when I changed the aesthetic to my game, for some reason I got a lot more views on it, even though they're like ostensibly the same in terms of like all the gameplay, but yeah, I haven't like bootstrapped like a real marketing push yet. I've been really trying to just refine, so like when I present to a publisher with my pitch deck and my website and all those sort of publisher facing, things that they can look at, I try to just polish those as much as I can. So I don't really have like a huge presence, and that sounds like a project in and of itself. And I don't think I'm ready to delve into that yet because I'm so focused on the game still. Yeah, so I'd say if you're interested in the game, obviously Entanglement on Steam, I think there might be more than one. Mine is the one with the boxes. And I think there's one that's like a board game or something that also looks pretty cool. But mine's the one with the boxes, and it's quantum entanglement themed. So if you come across that, that's probably right. And the demo's free right now, so just feel free to play it. I also love when people leave little comments, and I've only had a few people leave comments on Steam, but one of them spurred me to put in inverted y-axis controls. It's like like a special request, and I was like, sure. And so so that's for playing it. And then if you're interested in following development, I try to just post little things on YouTube. So right now there's two versions of the walkthrough because I wanted to update it with the aesthetic. So there's one with the old aesthetic and one with the new aesthetic. I left them both up just because people might be interested in to see how it used to look. And so you can expect stuff like that on there, like walkthroughs. I might do a devlog for each one of the mechanics, just because they're interesting. But beyond that, I'm not sure. I'll probably just intermittently post, whether it's on Reddit or YouTube, just little things, whether it's like an update to the game on Steam and what people can expect, or just like cool little nuggets on Reddit. And then I have so my YouTube channel, I guess, is let me see, it's Nth Degree Games Studio, and so if you look that up, or Entanglement Game, usually you can find videos pertaining to Entanglement. And then on Reddit, I'm Nth Degree Game Studio as well, and I usually post on like Unity 3D or indie game, and stuff like that, with middling success. But I really, if anything else, I always love when people play it, and even if people seem to have liked it thus far, I think I think the mechanics they find really cool. Sometimes they'll come across like a janky bit or something like that. And so I'm always open to any feedback and criticism, but also do enjoy hearing, just like, wow, this was neat, and when I finally wrap my head around, mechanic X, like it's really like cool moment for me, and so yeah, I think that's sort of it.